So this is why the team is misaligned on the vision. Nobody is misaligned on the world or the art style or the characters. Nobody is misaligned on the features or widgets that they're building. What they're misaligned on is why they are building those features. So when I was speaking to someone, for example, and we're talking about features and systems, and I took a different approach about player experience. I said, well, I can see what you're building, but what's the player experience those features and systems deliver that you're implementing? And they said, well, I don't know. And they said, because I'm meant to make decisions, and if we had a clear vision, the vision's meant to inform decision making. Like I can make that feature in 100 different ways. And the vision's meant to tell me which way I implement that feature. Because the vision is not articulated, that's the word I used, and instead it's interpreted or inferred. I have to imagine what it would be. I just make it up what I think is best at the day. But the problem is there's maybe 30 people on that feature, and we all just make it up in our own way. There's no guiding vision that says this feature exists to create this specific player experience. So when you implement it, this is what you're contributing towards. So we're starting to see one of the major outcomes, which is I went in to prove that the mental model is of low quality, and that turned out to be true. In particular, specifically, the low quality comes from the inability to articulate player experience. They all have to guess it. Oh, it's like that game over there. Prototype theory, which we talked about last time. Or they ignore the problem completely and say, well, let's just build something, features and systems.
Build our way. The way I described this recently was we're going to build our way out of the fact that we don't know what our game is.
Exactly.
And we hope that someday it will all come together. Just because we have so many pieces, we'll be able to all fit together, and then it'll make a cohesive experience, which is absolutely backwards, actually.
Completely backwards. So I keep saying this. I'm not a creativity researcher, but creativity and how it works comes up when you study vision, let's say, or ideation. And if I showed you the model that I come up with of how people think, essentially, whenever you work on a design problem, you're meant to define the problem as accurately as possible. So that's called the context. You have to describe the context. And so when I'm interviewing people, I had these boxes pre-drawn. I had this sheet. And when they were talking, I was drawing their mental model as they were talking, essentially. And I wanted to see, are you defining the context, the problem your team is making, or are you defining the form? The form is the solution. Now, widgets and features and systems all fit into the solution. That's all.
Yep.
That's just building something. But again, when I ask them a simple question, why are you building that? Nobody I interviewed could articulate what experience those features were delivering. So when it comes to their context, what are you doing? It was incredibly vague and open to interpretation. And by the way, nearly everybody I interviewed admitted that at some stage. They had to realize, come to their own realization that I cannot answer this guy's questions. And some people who wanted to speak to me thought they were good at game vision. They thought going in, well, I think I'm good at game vision and holding the vision, so I'm going to talk to this guy to show him how good I am at the vision. But we're in question number 3, and it's like, I have nothing in my locker. I can't answer your question. Yeah. So it's quite uncomfortable for some people.
I was curious because when you asked question number 3, what is the player experience? Part of me was wondering, I was like, if I was anticipating a lot of people returning to question, the B question, the stuff, and be like, what's the experience? Oh, well, these features and these systems and these that
happened.
That's what the player experience, and that did. Okay. I was because I was like, oh man, I feel like so many people would go back to that. Like, well, this is what I know. Again, like you said, the form, the solution rather than the understanding of the problem.
And because they don't understand the problem, like some people I interviewed, everything's anonymous here, and they all agreed, I'm not going to name any studios or names, that's not important. But some people were saying, well, we're going to make, our studio's goal is to make the best, let's say, shooter on the market. So we're jumping ahead to some other results here. So they started analyzing competitor analysis by looking at other games on the market. And they made a list of all the features and systems that the other games had to try and deconstruct, what does the best shooter look like? And I said, well, did that approach work for you? Obviously, I know it doesn't work, but I had to ask the question. I said, does that approach work for you? Did it help you design the best shooter? And they said, well, no, it didn't explain anything. Just because one game had all these features, it didn't explain at all why it was successful in the market. So they were aware that the model they had doesn't work, but they also didn't have any other model that was better. So we had reached the end of the limits of
Yeah.
their knowledge, right? The limits of their knowledge said the only way I know how to do a competitor analysis to position my game in the market is by looking at systems and features. If I had a better model, I would be using it, but they didn't have it. So again, that's useful for me that when I talk to them, they're revealing how they're thinking, which is essentially what I'm doing. I'm asking their processes. I'm asking, all these questions, and across, like, kind of a cross-functional way. I ask different questions to come at the problem from different angles, and it reveals their thinking, but it reveals the limits of their thinking, and that's the model I construct. So you can see that they're doing all these very basic things, like they're describing their own game in terms of features and systems, but they can't articulate the experience. And then when they try and position their game against others in the market, again, they're back to this very primitive approach of, well, what systems have they got, or what features, and we'll position our games with those. And what I wanted to talk about today really was the problems that I found, because that alone is significant, which is, does the game industry have a problem with game vision? Like the things that we're seeing on a weekly basis, studio closures, staff being laid off, staff feeling burned out, all of those problems come back to game vision. I think I talked about them in the previous episodes as well. Like, if you don't have game vision, that ultimately leads to friction at work. And I'm going to talk about friction in a second. I'll talk about another finding. So the solution's meant to contribute to solving, like, it is the number one problem statistically in the games industry. This is not a problem that's number 10 on the list or further. This is number one problem. If you want a high performing team, if you want a successful studio or game, this is the thing you would work on to give yourself the best chance. There is nothing higher. And number two is probably culture, the culture of your studio. I know it sounds like a broken record. We talk about it a lot, but that's the way it is. We can't, the data doesn't lie, sadly.
Yeah. So then I want to dive into this then. So you said that you were shocked. You said that one, you expected to see their what you discovered, which is people, their mental model basically breaks down, it disintegrates at a certain point, and they can't answer the question. They get stuck. But you said that sounded like that was one. I kind of expected that. And then, so what was worse?
So what was worse is I told you that when I was interviewing people, I only asked about creative vision. So all my questions were about your game and the experience, and everything was angled towards that. The shock came from, I asked some people these questions and they said something like, well, who cares? It's all about the audience, or it's all about the market. So they ignored my creative question entirely. They put the game in a box and shut the lid and went, who cares what that is? That's just a box with a thing in it. It's all about the audience. Like, can we sell 1 million copies? Or what's the total addressable market? Or someone said, well, this game only exists to move the company from position A to position B. It's a strategic play. If this game is successful, it'll move us from here to there, whatever here to there was. So even though I specifically...
by the way, just to jump in, I know I have worked with and know of many companies that attempt to be, we want to be a AAA studio. So when you went A to B, I was like, that's so, like, we're not quite perceived that way. And if we make this game and it wins, then we will be able to position ourselves as a AAA studio. I'm just bringing that up as an example. So those types of things. So what's surprising about that? I mentioned the word frame earlier. Your frame is how you see the world. My perspective on the world, my frame, and I was going in with the frame of only trying to prove about creative vision. And like I said, it was true that the mental model was of low quality. People could not talk or articulate about player experience. However, what it showed when this second frame appeared, which I ended up calling product vision. So you had creative vision, which is what's the game we're making. And product vision, I was split into two. One was audience and one was market opportunity. So target audience and market opportunity. There were people on the same team who did not want to talk about the game at all, or how creative it was, or the features, or the experience. They didn't even mention features. They didn't even care about that, right? It was just about, well, who is it for? Or how does that move the company forward? Or, strategic plays, all those types of things. Or positioning, where does it sit in the market? So it shows you that for some people on the same team, I think people have the assumption that we all work the same way. So there's a few more technical terms I'm going to explain here. Whenever you try and communicate a vision, there's two things that are actually going on, and one's called the knowledge structure. Knowledge structure is what's the content of the vision. So the features, the systems, the world, the stuff, right? And people have this idea that, well, if I just tell people what's in the vision, that's enough, right? I've told them what it is.
Like some people I interviewed said things like the creative director would come around and say, I told them what the game was yesterday. Why don't they get it? Well, that just tells me that person has no idea about psychology, because just transferring knowledge, there is no evidence whatsoever that is communication. And the reason is because knowledge by itself is not how we work. The other structure, I give a clue, knowledge structure, the other one's called your belief structure. Your belief structure says, whenever you hear that information, what sticks inside your head? How did you structure that information? So even though I'm hearing the words systems, widgets, world building, player experience, skill trees, narrative, blah, 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 for some people that they'll encode that in their mind in a certain way. Say you're a game designer. You'll encode that in the creative frame. But if you're in the business side, you'll ignore all that and you will restructure that information. The same information was there, but what you remembered and how you structured it was completely different. You do not have the same worldview because of your belief structure. So you could be sitting beside someone, and I've got a creative, view in the world, let's say, and someone else has a product view with different belief structures. And the creative director could come in and tell us both, here's the vision for the game. And he'll think, they were both sitting there and I told them all the knowledge I needed. I've done my job. I've transferred the information 100%. And we both leave that room and we have completely different views on what the game is. Fundamentally different. Our belief structure has overwritten the knowledge structure. It's more powerful. We have heard and encoded completely different bits of information. And that will also help them within. So different people, even within creative vision, they will hear different things because of the low quality model. They're interpreting what they think they heard because it wasn't articulated. If it was articulated, you'd have higher accuracy in the transfer. But they cannot do that because I've already told you that they can't do the articulation of player experience. So instead they infer it. Well, it's exciting and that's the novel feature. It's like that game over there. It's like the combat mechanic in that. What does that mean? Who knows? We'll generate that ourselves individually. So each person, depending on your belief structure and because of the low quality, is rewriting the game vision all the time. So that's why when I was doing the game vision alignment check in the previous 5 years, and I said, no team's aligned. This is all the things that is contributing to that happening. The idea of transmitting knowledge, that's way off the mark.